Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Hastings, Executive Producer of America ReFramed and Editorial Manager of World Channel. Thank you for joining us on this Facebook interview. I am here to introduce you to filmmaker Adele Sim. She is the director of a new film that is airing on World Channel. If you haven't seen it yet, it's at worldchannel.org for the next couple of months. Before I introduce you to Adele, I want to show a trailer from her film, Nailed It.
Coming to America ReFramed. The untold story of how Vietnamese refugees built a multi-billion-dollar industry.
How many members of your family do nails?
Currently 36.
You come to a country, everything new, I got no job, not a lot of money. It's really scary. We don't know what will happen, how we will live.
The Vietnamese saw an opportunity and went for it.
They faced racism.
We speak like broken English and then they laugh at us because our accent is different.
And hazardous working conditions.
In rashes, difficult breathing, cancer, breast cancer the most.
A surprising and personal chronicle of this tight-knit community.
The Vietnamese community is very close. It's a very family-oriented culture.
We choose to stay in the industry because we know it is an important part of our culture.
Nailed It on America ReFramed.
Hey, Adele, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you, Chris?
I'm well. So Adele, real quick, tell me about yourself and Nailed It.
Oh, about myself. Well, I am half Vietnamese, half white. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and Nailed It is really my ode or opus to the Vietnamese nail salon industry, community, and Vietnamese American history here in the U.S.
What inspired you to make this film?
Well, growing up Vietnamese, I knew that all the Asian nail salons in my community were owned by Vietnamese, so I always found it curious. But I stayed away from them because there was a stigma about them being kind of rude and dirty, but also there was embarrassment on my end about not speaking the Vietnamese language, so I couldn't fully communicate with who I assumed were all women inside the salon. And as I got older, just the vitriol against the nail salon seemed to grow and grow, and the chemicals came into the conversation. And I really just wanted to get at the bottom of things that I knew the broader American culture didn't understand about this Asian space, and specifically Vietnamese, and where we come from, why we're here, and why we do nails.
Cool. When you were, digging into this, and you said you're half Vietnamese. What was it about the Vietnamese culture that you thought was being missed?
That I thought was what?
Being missed.
Just the fact that we're Vietnamese people. We're not Chinese, we're not Japanese, we're not Korean. Historically, Koreans have also done nails, but outside of Manhattan, it feels like 100% of the Asian salons are Vietnamese owned. And growing up in the 90s, I always had to explain who I was and where my father was from, and through him, where I'm from, because people would recognize in my features that, oh, there's something going on here. She's some kind of Asian. A lot of times people think I'm Latina, but I was constantly having to explain who I was, especially growing up in a place like Portland, Oregon, which is very white. So really, this is kind of an extension of my growing voice, my growing body of work. My very first film was about mixed race identity, and that was back in 2008, 2009. So, the question of identity is something we're still really struggling with in the US, although the conversation is changing. And I insert those questions and that searching and a little bit of that yearning in this film about Vietnamese nail salons. And nobody's done it with that kind of depth before. And that's what I wanted to give it, because we rarely see what happened to Vietnamese people after the Vietnam War, the American War, right? So I really feel like nails gives us a perfect entryway into how Vietnamese American culture, Viet Q culture, started and how it economically sustained itself.
So in the film, we meet Charlie and Olivet, co-owners of Man Trap. How did you find these women and want to tell their story?
You know, you ask and you shall receive. I always wondered, even bigger than, not even on the same level as how did Vietnamese get into this thing? It's like, well, how did this thing get to the Black neighborhoods and become a cultural thing, right? That everybody followed. And I just started doing the research that everybody does when they make a documentary. And I asked Mike Vo, who was one of my earliest interviews, like, how did the Vietnamese nail salon get to the hood? He's like, you know, it's funny. My mom's business partner is African-American woman. Would you like to meet her? And I drove out to Olivet's house. She told me the story and I was like, wow, nobody ever talks about, oh, that one time a Black woman and a Vietnamese woman got together and made a salon empire that an entire group of people copied and took to other states, right? But it made a lot of sense because all fashion really does come from Black culture. And, you know, it was just my destiny to find that story and to find those characters that could contextualize it in such a loving kind of way that's so relatable. And that's the kind of story that we need right now.
Talk a little bit more about that. Like, what are you hoping that audiences, particularly those in the Vietnamese community here in the US and in the African-American community, because sometimes there's been some tension in those communities where they overlap.
Anti-Blackness is something that we deal with in our community. And it's at the forefront of my thoughts because it's my life, you know. Even though my mom is white, I understood what that felt like, not being fully accepted. And I just want Vietnamese people to see that there was a Black community there that received these salons. So you may have a lot to say, but without that community, we may not have survived, right?
Right.
I see a lot of animosity inside the salon, but I also see really beautiful relationships. And the nail salon is the only place you see immigrant Asian women and Black women and brown American women intimate with each other, literally touching each other's hands, right? For what, half-hour to hour-long service every 2 weeks? Like, that's something that can be built on. It's not exactly how the media frames it.
Right. Going in another direction, and how nail salons have been portrayed in the media, everything from health hazards to illegal to immigration questions. Like, what is it that you want, you know, audiences to understand about nail salons when the first thing a lot of, like, particularly white Americans, their first sort of thought when they think of nail salons is all the bad things that get reported? You kind of touched on this in the film, but what do you want those audiences where this is their first introduction to the Vietnamese nail salons to take away from this? Because there's been various different reports from around the country, everything from health hazards to immigration questions. What are you hoping that these audiences who aren't aware understand about that reporting and everything?
That you can't judge a book by its cover, and there's a huge backstory to this thing that you should be aware of before you know, start talking yap about these Asian salons. They're easy targets because, you know, hey, a lot of the times English is not the first language spoken on premises, and that also is where they get into trouble too, right? And let me look at you. And immigrant Asian people aren't going to defend themselves, especially in this day and age, because they don't want any trouble from the authorities. Our story as Asian Americans is a little bit different, but because we had to escape from Vietnam because of communism, you know, we actually have political asylum here, right? And so this has also been something that has made Vietnamese people perhaps feel better than other refugees and other immigrants, right? But the breadth of American people that have kind of negative thoughts about the Asian salons, I mean, these are the kind of people that are calling ICE on nail salons, not knowing that these people have political asylum here. Do you know what I'm saying? And not just that, but like calling, you know, the health board because you don't like this Asian business in the neighborhood. That happens too. And I also see just kind of this expectation of body work from these women without any kind of regard for what they go through every day and what they may have been through. So I'm really just trying to improve that dialogue inside the salon and educate everybody, but especially the people working inside the salon 24/7 that have to inhale all the chemicals day after day, right? And something that I came across in my research with the film is there's been little to no scientific study on the health outcomes for people that work inside of the salon. There's a lot of soapboxing about it, but no action, no legislation, no regulation on the chemical companies, you know, that produce the chemicals that go into that products. The only change has come on the consumer side because they don't want to have to be exposed to the chemicals, right? So there has to be a level of empathy that extends to the people that work inside the nail salon all the time and inhale the chemicals all the time, right?
Do you think this film can bring awareness to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the conversation I hope starts in the thread here, you know, and I'm happy to share all of my research that I've done about the real science of the chemicals that are in these products that the women are inhaling, right? And also the dust. Oh, gels are really big now. People think that's healthier, right? Well, when you file that down, the dust is even finer than the acrylic dust, right? And even if something smells really strong, yes, it could still be bad for you, but it could be less bad for you than the chemicals that you can't smell. So you really have to be careful about companies that also rebrand themselves as green and safe, because when you actually pay for the reports and you get the nail polishes ranked on, you know, least the most healthy, least likely to kill you, they're not as green as they say they are. And a lot of these companies don't have to do any kind of, they don't have to do any reporting on their own products. So it's up to the consumer to, you know, understand this whole world of science that we just are not educated for.
Right. You know, when you talk about this, like this now has been in, these nail salons have been in people's families now for a couple of years. And even in the film, you see within a family that, you know, some businesses are being passed on to first generation Vietnamese kids. Do you see this industry?
We call them second generation. So first generation and then, yeah, the kids. Go ahead.
Do you see that continuing on?
Well, you know, maybe this industry isn't just meant for one race of people, right? This was a stepping stone for us when we came here. And so I actually see a lot of Latino people getting into the business everywhere. So, you know, maybe that's the sequel, because there's definitely not the same flood of people coming from Vietnam. You probably have a better chance surviving there, shoot. But you know, there's just less people coming, and you needed that workforce to keep the salon going. And just the conditions of late capitalism that we're living under, it's hard to keep paying the rent and providing this cheap service that now everybody expects to be so extremely cheap and so extremely fast. You see a lot of the businesses going out of business. So, you know, some of the awareness about the way the Vietnamese salons were cutting corners has been good, because it's elevated the industry to a point where if you're doing stuff at such a dirty level, you're not going to be able to have customers. Like, there's way too many salons out there that are going to be doing it the right way. So it's about educating people. But there's also a class thing within my own people, to where some people don't even want to support me with this film because they don't want to be associated with doing nails, even though nails may be what put them through their PhD program. So I'm still, like, you know, trying to educate my own people who even came up through the salon. But, you know, classism is so great in this country that you kind of look down on your own people, which I did when I was 18, but I got over it. You know,
when you think about, let's say there wasn't this nail salon industry, what do you think the Vietnamese community would be like if they didn't have this path, this industry?
Well, we'd still have the pho restaurants, and
Yeah.
it's just we'd still be pharmacists. What else? Vietnamese women are business women, and they carried this culture on their backs when they got here. And when you come as a refugee, sometimes it's easier to be accepted as a woman, which I get into in the film, as a man. So sometimes the woman is going to have employment before the man. And if she gets the salon going and that's like her domain, that's her business, it's going to take off. So they may have found something else, because it's not like nails is an ancient secret that we brought over with us from the Orient. It started in the US, which I, detail in the film. So I don't know, it's hard to say. There's still very close-knit family structures, and I don't know, Vietnamese, they like to think that they would have always discovered nails. So I do wonder if Tippy had not interceded, if they would have found their way to it, but I don't think so. It's like the Cambodians found donut shops. It just took one guy. They call him the Donut King. AJ Plus did a piece on this. So sometimes it just takes one person to kind of turn on the light for an entire community of people that's economically struggling and needs to find employment, right, to survive in this country. So it's been a huge safety net. It's still a safety net. There's people losing their jobs, Vietnamese people losing their jobs all the time, but they're able to go into this industry, sometimes work with a family member, right, to really learn the business. Like another thing I get into in the film is, in the 90s, there was a lot of Vietnamese gangs, Asian gangs. So the men went to prison. When they came out, it's not easy to get a job after you come out of prison, right? Right. But you could go work for your auntie, and hey, maybe you could even learn the ropes and open your own nail salon. And hey, you were really good at like graffiti and tattoo stuff in prison. Wow, these women are really coming to you to get their nails done. So that's also been a phenomenon within the culture to sustain the culture. So we all, stay together. So nobody like falls off, right? And it's been a working class economic foothold for us and beyond. There's people that have made a lot of money off of this industry too.
Right. So final sort of wrap-up question. We intentionally in program nailed it in Asian Pacific Asian Heritage Month. And you are an Asian American filmmaker. What does that mean for you?
Well, to me, it means what happened to us after war, after we made it across the ocean to this country. What does it mean to be Viet Q, overseas Viet? What did we have to do to survive? So for me, again, this is creating media that previously wasn't there so people can better understand us in this country, the context of where we come from, right? Like it's not just about not being Chinese, but really understanding the war stories that a lot of Asian Americans carry. So every year when AAPI History Month comes around, I always think of war, right? Okay. I always think about how all the different Asians got here and what their backstory is and what they faced after they settled here and actually thought they were making it, like the Japanese, right? So with all of us throughout the diaspora, our Americanness is forged by blood. And this was a way for me to celebrate that, like thriving while surviving.
Excellent. Adele, thank you for joining us today. The great thing about Adele is on social media, and she will be watching this video too. And so if you have questions for Adele, please do ask them in the comments underneath this box. Adele, is there anything you want to leave them with today?
No, just thanks for tuning in and just thinking about the future. How can we make the salon industry even better? With all of these incredibly smart people out there, with all of these Vietnamese with, science degrees, like how could we make products for the salon that are truly healthy?
Excellent. And so we'll leave it there. Please do comment and let us know what you think about Nailed It. Adele will be lurking and I will be lurking, and we will try to have a conversation with you. I'm Chris Hastings, Executive Producer for America ReFramed, Editorial Manager for World Channel. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.